What is grading? Grading evaluates what a student knows or can do at a particular point in time. It differs from response because it is summative rather than formative. It differs from writing assessment because it refers to a classroom situation rather than standardized testing programs. Grading determines whether a student has met the requirements of a writing course or whether a student has met the requirements of a writing project. So what is judged can be a specific piece of writing or a student. Let's look at some of the history of grading. By 1813, Yale used the 4-point scale. By the 1860s, a 100-point scale was used. By 1865, written examinations supplemented oral examinations. By 1870, course of study becomes course worth credit. In 1886, Harvard establishes English A as a 2-semester composition course. So in other words, both letter grading and first-year composition appeared in the 1880s at Harvard. Let's do a quick review of history. Course of study becomes course. Course becomes commodity. Commodity becomes currency. Currency value is determined by the grade. Thus, it becomes impossible to separate the course from the grade. Grades exist for institutional administrative convenience. Grades fit record-keeping formats. Grades look precise. Grades look objective. Grades label not only papers, but their writers. Let's look at a case study from 1915 at the University of Illinois, with the goal of improving literacy among their first-generation college students. Quote, "Since illiteracy exists among our students, its eradication is our first concern." In this composition case study, the situation was 1,450 students taught 55 sections of Rhetoric 1 by 25 instructors. The problem? A large student population with constantly shifting staff. The goal? Determine the best method for uniform grading, either fixed standard or sliding scale. The strategy: have instructors meet weekly to grade sample student themes. The fixed standard method included themes graded with the same level of rigor all semester, no allowances for ignorance or poor preparation. The student was penalized at the beginning, but he could better visualize progress. But it was possible for some students to pass without learning a thing. In the sliding scale, assignments were graded more rigorously as the student learned more concepts. This gives the student a chance to acquire new knowledge, but it was harder for students to determine their progress, so it may be discouraging. And it's not as easy to standardize in a large course with many instructors. The winner? Fixed standard. Exercises on grammar and punctuation graded as points were included in this system. Themes were based on content, given letter grades. Some of those themes were double graded. It was optional. You could have one for content and one for form. The first semester rubric, also known as the positive virtues, were as follows: individual thinking, variety and precision of expression, a sense of form. The penalties: tardy assignments lowered 1 letter grade. Persistent errors are met with firm and increasing reductions of grades until the error disappears. While the letter grades range from A to E, the instructor is free to give an F should the theme be exceptionally bad. And let's cover the rhetoric of letter grades. A equals excellent, B good, C mediocre, D poor, E failing, F hopeless. C- is the strip between the desert and the sown ground. D represents the minimum of accomplishment. It may be the hopeful sign of ascent from E, or it may be the sad mark indicating lack of real ability. Grade E for any one of the following: 3 or more misspelled words, 2 sentences with violent changes of construction, 2 unclear sentences, 2 straggling sentences, 1 comma fault, 1 incomplete sentence, 2 grammatical errors, a noticeable number of improprieties and barbarisms, a marked lack of unity, a marked lack of coherence. Let's fast forward to World War II, when the GI Bill led to even more standardization attempts. In 1943, the Navy sent large numbers of men to college based on intelligence test scores. Although they were bright, these students were poorly prepared. This problem was compounded after the war, when floods of veterans went to college on the GI Bill. The university was seen as a means to preserve the social order. Efficiency was sought to meet the needs of post-war students. This brought us to the era of writing assessment. Writing assessment led to shifting standards over the years. There were 3 waves since 1950. The first wave was from 1950 to 1970. Objective tests, and a focus on error that determined what classroom a student entered. The self is a passive, forced choice response to an external expert's understanding of language conventions. In the second wave, from 1970 to 1986, we have the holistically scored essay. Error comes into the classroom. It's understood as a deficit, as clues used to plot intervention strategies. The self becomes an agent who creates text, conventionally and substantially determined. In the third wave, from 1986 to the present, we have portfolio assessment and program assessment. Errors create unconventional readings, become legitimate text, a means of knowing. The self emerges, and it's often multiple, created through diverse text and reflective text. So what's wrong with grades? The dialogue between students and teachers is at the very center of the learning process. Once you place a grade on that theme, it will utterly dominate the discourse. Responding versus grading. Responding is the teacher as coach in dialogue with the student. Grading is the teacher as referee, cutting short dialogue with an official final call. Playing both coach and referee puts the teacher in a difficult position, jeopardizing trust and dialogue with students. Why wait to grade? Praise on a paper with a low grade is used as evidence against the teacher. Revision suggestions on a passing paper are taken as unwarranted objections. Grades force the teacher out of dialogue with the students and into an argument. Grades lead students to play it safe. The response-only approach doesn't mean a refusal to criticize in favor of constant praise and encouragement. It doesn't mean secret grades while pretending not to grade. And it doesn't mean substituting another grading system, for example, excellent, fair, or smiley faces. And any attempt to deceive students by creating false expectations of high grades at the end of the course is not a good idea. Responding, grading, it all takes so much time. Here is a short list of historical shortcuts. Mark only the presence of the problem, but leave it to the student to locate and correct. Use a projector to respond to student writing in class. Hold one-on-one conferences. Use a checklist or rubber stamp scale of criteria. Have fellow students read and respond to papers. Hold 1-on-2 or 1-on-3 conferences. Record comments on audio tape. Have students evaluate their own essays. Respond only to a limited number of criteria. Respond only to praiseworthy accomplishments. Have students use computerized grammar, spelling, or style checkers. Add comments to students' digital text with word processing footnotes or hypertext frames. Response is still based on regulations and judgment. But there's nothing in the nature of regulations ensuring that the rules and conventions will be followed or even understood by students. When forced to explain their teacher's comments, they misinterpret a shocking portion of it. To grade or not to grade? Current traditional theory says you reduce the motivation to excel if there's no sense of performance level. Newer models of theory say you reduce the motivation to revise if writing is treated as a product. Both response and assessment are necessary, and students need to learn to assess their own writing, so assessment must be an explicit part of the writing classroom. Why do we need final grades? Accountability to forces both inside and outside the institution. Plus, it seems to sum up nicely what has been accomplished in a form easy to manage.